There are 310 different abilities as of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and yet despite that wide selection, there are still several in-game mechanics that just can't be touched by the ability system whatsoever. Well, in this video, I'm going to try to remedy that a bit by coming up with 20 abilities that I think would make perfect additions to the Pokemon franchise. So, let's get to my first ability, which I've called Escapism. Escapism would give any switching move used by the user a boost to its priority, which means that if you used a switching move with a Pokemon with Escapism, it would go first in the turn order, unless another Pokemon on the battlefield used a priority move. As for a Pokemon that deserves this ability, I think Emolga is a perfect fit. Emolga has access to the moves Volt Switch, U-Turn, and Baton Pass, which means that it can definitely make use of the ability Escapism in battle. Emolga is also based on the Flying Squirrel, which is a naturally very shy and skittish animal, so giving Emolga the Escapism ability makes very good sense thematically with its design. The next ability that I think could spice up battles is Inverter. Inverter would turn any battlefield into an inverse battle when a Pokemon with this ability is in play. Inverse battle mechanics were first introduced in X and Y, yet in every instance of their appearance since then, they are very limited in where they can take place. I figured that since the mechanic is already available in the games, why not allow players to access it under more normal circumstances? As for Pokemon that I think deserve this ability, I think that the Jynx line can make perfect use of it as a hidden ability. As Psychic Ice dual types, Jynx and Smoochum are weak to 6 of the 18 types, and only resist 2. With the Inverter ability, these weaknesses would become resistances, and any strong, resistant Pokemon on the opposite side of the battlefield would be instantly crippled. We all know that water moves are boosted in the rain. However, with the new ability Hydroponics, grass-type moves used by the user will also be boosted in the rain. The idea is pretty simple to incorporate, being based entirely on the idea of hydroponic agriculture, in which plants are grown in a nutrient solution rather than in soil. Both water and sunlight are necessary for photosynthesis, and some plants don't even really use all that much sunlight to get the energy they need. So, why not extend this to the Pokemon world and boost some Pokemon's grass-type moves in the rain? I think the Ludicolo line would be the best fit for this ability, and that it should replace their Swift Swim ability. Lotad, Lombre, and Ludicolo all have a wide arsenal of water and grass-type moves that would all be boosted in the rain if they had the ability Hydroponics. Static, Flame Body, Poison Point, and Effect Spore are all abilities that can induce non-volatile status conditions upon contact with a Pokemon. Non-volatile status conditions, of course, being things like sleep, poison, paralysis, and burn. However, there is one non-volatile status condition that cannot be caused by an ability whatsoever: Frozen. To remedy this, I suggest we add the ability Supercooled, which has a 33% chance of freezing any attacker upon contact. The name for this ability is based on the real-world phenomenon of supercooling, in which a liquid can be cooled down to below its normal freezing point. When a supercooled liquid is disturbed, such as on contact for instance, it will instantly freeze. For lore reasons, I think it makes the most sense to give this ability to a dual water and ice type Pokemon. So the Pokemon I've chosen for this is Arctovish. I think that Arctovish could make the best use of this ability as its hidden ability rather than Slush Rush. Plus, a prehistoric amalgamation Pokemon freezing anything upon contact is just awesome. The next ability that I suggest we add is Fortify. The Fortify ability would boost a Pokemon's physical defense stat by 1 stage every single turn that a sandstorm is active. The idea behind this ability is that a Pokemon will take sand during the sandstorm and build it up around its body and surrounding area to make a protective layer. The more sand there is, the more you can build up and the higher your physical defense stat. Unlike other defense stats, such as what rock types have when they're in a sandstorm, these buffs last even after the sandstorm ends. The sand doesn't just magically go away. The Pokemon that I think could best benefit from this ability without becoming too busted is the Rampardos line. I made this decision because Rampardos has the lowest physical defense stat of any fully evolved rock-type Pokemon, at a measly base 60. 60! This change in ability would give it much more staying power, so it could hopefully better use its whopping 165 base attack. Tailwind is a move that sets up a wind current that blows from behind your team and doubles the speed of all Pokemon on your side of the field for 4 turns. There are many abilities that set up things like terrain and weather conditions upon switch-in, so why not allow an ability to set up something like Tailwind? So the ability that I'm suggesting we let do this is called Jetstream. With the Jetstream ability, upon switch-in, a Tailwind will automatically be set up. As an additional effect, any Pokemon with the Jetstream ability will also have an immunity to ground-type moves. As for Pokemon that deserve this new ability, I think that Latios and Latias are the perfect fit because they are quite literally based on jets. The pun is just too good to pass up. And while they themselves don't really need a buff to their speed, allowing partner Pokemon to ride on tailwinds set up by the Jetstream ability would give both of these Pokemon some additional utility. Abilities like Dazzling and Queenly Majesty completely block all effects of priority moves used against the Pokemon with these abilities. The next ability I'm suggesting, called Now or Never, works in a similar vein. Except for blocking all priority moves, it blocks all moves that require a turn to charge, all 17 of which are listed on the screen now. Clearly an ability like this one needs to go on a very impatient Pokemon, so for that reason, I think that Vigoroth deserves this ability. In Pokemon Sleep, Vigoroth is associated with the impatient sleeping style, and it's very clear from Pokédex entries that Vigoroth just can't stand to sit still for even a minute. So, making Now or Never one of its abilities adds just a bit more pizzazz to this Pokemon. Unfortunately, this ability should not extend backwards to Slackoth or forward to Slacking for design, balance, and thematic reasons. But honestly, this ability has some pretty limited utility seeing as how infrequent charging moves are, so it's probably fine to restrict it solely to a middle stage evolution. The next ability I suggest we add is Apprentice, which would copy the stat changes of a partner Pokemon on the battlefield. Think of this ability as a psych-up that is always active, but that only copies new stat changes that have taken place since switching in. The signature ability of Flamigo, Co-Star, is very similar to this ability, however that ability only activates once, and it's only upon switching in. Apprentice is clearly much more powerful, assuming that the Pokemon that it's attached to can manage to stay in battle long enough for its partner to set up. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, however, because Apprentice will also copy any stat debuffs. If any apprentice learns from a bad teacher, clearly they're going to learn some bad techniques. To provide balance to this ability, it definitely should not go on any Pokemon that is already considered strong. Plus, that doesn't really make much sense thematically either. So instead, I propose that it gets added to the baby Pokemon Riolu and Toxel. Riolu trains under Lucario as an apprentice to become a better fighter, while Toxel trains under Toxtricity to become a better musician. Pokemon get a 50% move power boost to moves that match their type. This is called the Same Type Attack bonus, or STAB for short. Some abilities interact directly with this mechanic. For example, Adaptability changes the stab boost from 50% to 100%, and other abilities like Rocky Payload achieve a similar effect to stab for moves that don't even match a Pokemon's type. However, there are no abilities that influence stab when it comes to defending from these attacks. I think this needs to change, so I'm suggesting we add the ability Aloof, which would completely ignore all same type attack bonuses for moves directed at the Pokemon with this ability. And I think the perfect Pokemon to give this ability to is Furfrou. Clearly with all the cosmetic styles available, Furfrou is a Pokemon that appeals to the upper class, and as such, I think it would have the snooty attitude that makes it perfect for having Aloof as a hidden ability. Solar Power boosts a Pokemon's special attack stat in the sun in exchange for a fraction of its maximum HP every turn. There isn't a physical version of this ability, and that just kinda rubbed me the wrong way, so I decided to make one. The ability Xylem Boost will boost a Pokemon's physical attack stat in harsh sunlight in exchange for 1/8 of their maximum HP every turn the sun is active. Xylem is a type of vascular tissue in plants that is responsible for transferring nutrients and water upwards from the roots. The most well-known type of Xylem is wood, and there are many Pokemon based on trees and woody plants that I think can make great choices for this ability. For example, I think that the Trevenant line is the perfect fit here, because both Phantump and Trevenant learn very strong physical moves like Poltergeist and Woodhammer that would greatly benefit from this ability. In the same theme as the last one of modifying an existing ability, I think that we should have an ability that acts the same way that Merciless does for burns. In case you're unaware, since it is the often unused signature ability of the Toxapex line, Merciless is an ability that automatically makes it so that every attack used against a poison target will be a critical hit. So likewise, the new ability Third Degree will ensure that every hit against a burn target will result in a critical hit. As for a Pokemon to give this ability to, I think it makes the most sense to give it to the Houndour line in exchange for their Early Bird ability. A Dark and Fire type like Houndoom seems like just the type to strike a burn target in the area that hurts the worst, therefore ensuring a critical hit with every attack. Terrains were introduced in Generation 6 as a new way of altering the battlefield independent of existing effects like weather and Trick Room. Along with the introduction of terrains came the ability Grass Pelt, the signature ability of the Go-Goat line, which raises their defense stat by 50% when grassy terrain is active. In the same line as Grass Pelt, an ability that I think could have some very good utility is Terrain Guard, which would boost a Pokemon's defense and special defense stats by 25% whenever any terrain is active. This is a much more versatile version of Grassy Pelt, so I don't want to give it to a Pokemon that already has some pretty good defense stats. I also want to make sure that I give it to a Pokemon that can learn at least 2 terrain-setting moves. So I'm going to give this ability to Meowstic in exchange for its Infiltrator ability. Meowstic can learn both Psychic Terrain and Misty Terrain, and only has a defense and special defense stat of 76 and 81 respectively, so the buffs from the Terrain Guard ability won't make them too broken. The heavy-duty boots are a held item that can completely negate the damage of any entry hazards upon switching in. For many other held items in Pokemon, there are abilities that act in similar ways. For example, the Clear Body ability is an analog of the Clear Amulet. However, there is no such ability analog for the heavy-duty boots, so I propose the ability Vigilance, which does exactly that. Entry hazards will not affect a Pokemon with the ability Vigilance. To be vigilant is to maintain a careful watch for danger or difficulties, which is exactly what a Pokemon with this ability would do upon entering battle. And what better Pokemon to give this ability to than the Lookout Pokemon Watchog? Of course, this is based solely on thematics, since I don't actually believe that Watchog's viability would be helped very much by giving it Vigilance. But it's also my fake ability, and I can give it to whatever Pokemon I want to, dang it. Speaking of entry hazards, this next ability is a step up from Vigilance. Spic and Span removes all entry hazards on a player's side of the field whenever a Pokemon with this ability is switched in. Of course, to stop this from being a little too busted, because it's basically like a free defog or rapid spin without having to use a turn up, I'm going to require that this ability only activates after the entry hazards have dealt damage. And as for Pokemon that I think deserve this ability, we again look to Unova at the Cinccino line. I was originally going to name this ability Tidy Up, but then when I got to looking around online to make sure I wasn't double dipping with ability and move names, I found out that Tidy Up was a move introduced in Generation 9 that's already learned by Cinccino as an egg move. Tidy Up as a move removes all entry hazards and gives Cinccino a boost to its attack and speed stats. Cinccino and Cinccino are known to be very clean and take care of dust and dirt quickly, so it's just too perfect a fit to not give this line Spic and Span, especially since they already have access to a move of the same name that I was going to give this ability. The next ability I propose we add is Skeptic, which would have the damage of all special moves directed at the Pokemon with this ability. If your Pokemon didn't believe in magic, or ghosts, or psychics, or any of that nonsense, then of course they would take reduced damage from mystical moves, which I'm interpreting to be special type moves here. There are of course special moves that don't necessarily fit this magical, mystical criterion like Flamethrower and Surf, but I personally couldn't think of a better name for this ability, so if you can think of one, please drop it in the comments below. But really, I just want this ability to act like some sort of special attack parallel to Furcoat or Fluffy. I think that the best Pokemon for this ability would be one that has a naturally very low special defense stat, and of all the Pokemon I looked at, the one that I think matches the theme of this ability closest is Stonejourner. Giving the Pokemon based on Stonehenge, a famous landmark that has spawned countless conspiracy theories, an ability based on disbelief and skepticism is just too deliciously ironic to pass up. Plus, this ability would bolster its really bad 20 base special defense stat at least a tiny bit. We all know about Intimidate, the ability that reduces the attack stat of an opposing Pokemon upon switching in. However, not every Pokemon is a physical attacker, so it really feels like there should be some sort of special attack equivalent for Intimidate, so I propose the ability Show Off. When a Pokemon with Show Off enters the battlefield, the special attack stats of all opposing Pokemon will be lowered by 1 stage. Pokemon with Show Off would act in such a way to make your opponents feel extreme imposter syndrome and lose all of their self-confidence. Isn't that fun? I think the best fit for this ability would be Milotic, who wouldn't even give a second thought to showing off their strength and beauty to their enemies. And as a bonus, this ability would give this line yet another parallel to Magikarp and Gyarados. Being able to heal non-volatile status conditions can completely turn the tide of a battle, and there exist many abilities that allow a Pokemon to heal either itself or its allies. However, none of the abilities that are able to heal allies' status conditions are guaranteed to activate. The best case scenario right now is the ability Healer, which has a 30% chance to activate every turn. I think we should introduce an ability that automatically heals any status condition of an ally upon switch in, either of the Pokemon with the ability or of the ally itself. And I think a fitting name for this ability would be Medic. And as for a Pokemon I think it would fit well, I think the Blissey line is the perfect candidate, since they're often portrayed as nurses in the Pokemon world. I would probably replace their Serene Grace ability with Medic, just so that all 3 potential Blissey abilities involve healing a status condition in some way. Items like the Throat Spray, Weakness Policy, and Focus Sash all get used up upon activation, but wouldn't it be nice if there was a chance that they didn't? That's where the ability Frugal comes into play. With Frugal, any turn where a single-use item is used up, there's now a 30% chance for your Pokemon to recover the item to use again in the same battle. The idea here being that a Frugal Pokemon would squeeze every last drop out of an item that they possibly can. It's pretty much like a Pokemon equivalent of the show Extreme Cheapskates. Money-hungry and stingy Pokemon seem like the perfect choice for this ability, and what better choice for that than Meowth and its evolutions. By restricting this potentially game-changing ability to such weak Pokemon, it's not going to become absolutely meta-defining or meta-busting, yet will still add lots of personality and flair into the game. Moves like Whirlwind and Roar force your opponent to switch out their Pokemon, but there are no abilities that have this same effect. It's almost certainly because something like that would be completely busted in any sort of competitive doubles scene. However, just for fun, let's assume we introduce the Threaten ability. This ability activates upon switching in, and forces your opponent to switch out all of their Pokemon for others in their party, if any are available. If activated against a wild Pokemon, this ability would do nothing. Because let's just face it would be very annoying to get involved in wild battles that you can't even participate in just because your ability ends them immediately. There are many threatening Pokemon that could fit the bill for this ability, but the one that I think takes the cake is Pangoro. Its dark typing and threatening stature are perfect for scaring your opponent's Pokemon back into their Pokeballs. Flowers are known to spread their seeds far and wide, either by attaching to pollinators or by floating by themselves on a breeze. Grass Pokemon can spread their seeds through the move Leech Seed, which sets up the seeded status on an opposing Pokemon and saps some of their maximum HP every turn. But why should grass types only be able to actively spread their seeds when plants in our world can do so passively? Along this line of logic, I think the ability Germinate could help out with some realism here. Germinate would automatically set up Leech Seed on an opponent's Pokemon upon direct contact. And I think the best Pokemon to get this ability would be the Sunflora line. These Pokemon are weak and already primarily focus on sapping energy from their opponents and environment, so giving them this ability to automatically set up a Leech Seed would strengthen their connection with the world in a thematic sense and give them a bit more viability. Though, let's be realistic here, it's still Sunflora and Sunkern we're talking about, and those Pokemon are hot garbage. And those are all of the new abilities that I have to share with you today. Which one was your favorite? And if given the chance, what ability would you add to the Pokemon franchise? If you'd like to see me play Pokemon Scarlet with the overall Pokemon speed set to 100, click the video on the left. Or, if you'd rather see some weird Pokédex entries that I found in the Pokemon trading card game, click the video on the right. I'll see you next time.